well, right back into it. So again, Stephanie Studebaker, I work in revenue operations at Service Express. Thanks for joining today. I've got a quick intro on me. Service Express, we're a data center maintenance and infrastructure provider. So that's going to impact some of the stories I use today because we have a bit of a longer buyer journey. We started using Marketo Measure, Adobe's Marketo Measure in about 2019. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that today. And also because it impacts our conversation today, our CRM is Salesforce. So I'll be excited to hear a little bit more about the CRM that all of you use as that will be really helpful for showing how to bring that information into your CRM. So to kick us off here, enough about me. I've got a question about you. So I pulled a little poll in here. You can use a QR code to answer it or go to slido.com. I'll give you a few seconds to answer this question. But my question for all of you today is how do you feel about how your company measures go-to-market performance, your go-to-market performance? So I answered the question. I'd love to see how each of you answer it too, because that'll help in speaking to you today. So the options we have are great and good. Other, I'd love to hear maybe in the chat about the other. Work in progress, that's great. We have a model set up, but would like to make some improvements. That's a great place to start today. And just getting started. I love seeing just getting started because we are all on our journey as we are moving forward and measuring attribution. Great. So majority of us are just getting started in our journey, and that's fantastic. So I'll make sure to spend some good time on the slides today that pertain to our attribution model setup. So goals for today, hoping to review a few tips on getting your model set up. So for those that are just getting started in your journey, great. We'll focus on that today. And then for everyone and those that have a great model going already, see how to incorporate the information from your attribution model into other objects. This is something we love doing at our company. So I'm happy to share a few tips on how that can really answer the question of driving more revenue for your company. And then hoping to circle back in closing on a few ideas on how to use your attribution model to empower your stakeholders to make decisions on channel optimization. My hope for today, the key takeaway is just knowing that understanding your attribution model well is what enables you to make the needed optimizations you need to really drive revenue and efficiency for your company. So let's dive in first to what is attribution and a few considerations around it, and we'll look at a few model types too. So to kick us off, when we signed on 2017, or sorry, actually with Marketo Measure 2019, I grabbed this quote from Visible at the time. So if you see the word Visible today, it's the legacy name for Marketo Measure from Adobe. And so just note, you might see it a little bit, but grab this quote when we started. I love how they put it. It's the technique of giving value. So think pipeline dollars, revenue dollars to the touch points that happen. And in our company, we like looking at it as a touch point is anytime your marketing team or your go-to-market team engages with your prospects and customers. And then multi-touch attribution is just spreading the wealth. It's knowing that channels can really work together to come alongside that buyer journey. Here's a few whys. I'm sure some of you are already jumping into this, but why do we even use attribution in the first place? It's to make essential decisions. So what channels are driving funnel performance? Which one should be invested in more? How well is your marketing department doing as a whole? It's to spend your budget efficiently. So you don't want to waste time on initiatives that don't work. You want to pour it into the ones that are working. So tracking that ROI for your company. To communicate improve performance effectively and accurately. Reporting is so helpful in telling the story, and that circles us back to the main point of today, which is you are using your attribution model well when you can answer your stakeholders and your questions. That's what it's designed to do, and it's very effective at doing that. So let's look at some options here. I've pulled an example of one of our buyers' journeys just to highlight some different models that could potentially work for you along the way. There's a great, for those of you that are newer, there's some great Adobe Marketo Measure product docs out there that'll go into depth a bit more on the different models you can set up in your instance. but I just want to touch on a few here because I like highlighting the questions that they can answer for you. So before we jump into the next few slides of models, just to show you what's on this timeline, what we love to do with our model is highlight some success stories. So this is just an example of one of our customers' journeys to becoming a customer with us. You'll see on the bottom, it's our marketing engagements here. So the person visited a homepage. Another person on this account took a survey. We had a trade show that we had a few booth attendees from. A few people read our articles on a third-party site and opted in to receiving correspondence from us. And they took a LinkedIn survey. And I'm looking at our faces, so I'm going to move them over here. But then someone else visited our web page and then search with intent. For us, we call that intent data. So those are some marketing engagements on this type of timeline. Then on the top, you'll see the seller and sales development teams engagement. So before the marketing team came into play, we actually had some meetings with this particular company from 2017 to 2020. Then they started getting assistance from our marketing team. And then we got some more support from sales dev meetings along the way. You'll see this is when our op is created and then it progresses to close. So if we're looking at the first touch attribution model, so this is an option of how you can look at your data. This can be great if you are trying to answer the question of what's bringing this buyer, this company to the table to start with. So in this case, if you were to create an opportunity over here, that's worth $100. All that $100 is going to go to what first engaged that in opportunity. And so that's visiting the homepage here. You'll see 100% of attribution out of all the attribution. So if you're in the B2C realm, if you have a shorter buying cycle, sometimes this is what companies care about, and this can get you the answer you need. There's some limitations here, as you'll see with the companies with longer buying cycles like Service Express, you might miss out on some of the story. So let's look at a few other options that could potentially work for you. So jumping into the W-shaped model, what that basically means is it's highlighting three key points here. So the key stages in the W-shaped model are your first touch. So again, could be anonymous or known, but that's the first thing that the person did that affected your opportunity. The lead creation, that's pulling people into your system. They fill out some information that tells you who they are. And then also the last engagement that happened before your op was created. So those are the key stages you'll see down below. If you created a $100 opportunity, that's going to kick 30% of the attribution from that opportunity back to this first touch, lead creation, and op creation touches. And then it's going to divide that remaining credit across the middle touches along the way. So again, a Marketo product doc can walk you a bit more through this, but it's good to highlight that for companies that maybe you're helping a bit more on the front end before the op is created with your go-to-market strategy, and say the marketing team is not tagging back in as much after the op is created, a model like this could be a good fit for you to track your key stages of what first got people to be engaged with you, what drove the lead creation, and what got that op created. One that we considered, because I should share, back in the day, we actually had a first touch model back in 2017 and started implementing our model after that. But a full path is one that we were really looking at for our engagement. I'm going to go ahead and show all of these pieces here. The only difference, the key difference between that full path model and the W-shaped model is really you're also including this closed touch. So a lot of go-to-market strategies, you're still engaging with your buyer after the opportunity is created and supporting. Say if you're focusing on marketing touch points, maybe marketing's doing some re-engages to bring people back, or they're just supporting the buyer journey to the closed one. This closed piece gets 22.5% of the credit, the same amount of credit as your op creation, lead creation, and first touch in this case. And then the remaining credit of, say, a $100 opportunity is going to be divided across all these middle touches along the way. So if you have a marketing team or a go-to-market strategy that's engaging buyers throughout the buyer funnel to that closed one, a fit like this could be good for you. All right, the last one I'll show is actually Service Express's custom model. So feel free to use a similar example as this one. What I like about having a custom model set up in our setting is you can actually optimize this throughout your journey. There's a machine learning model. If you select, I want a custom model that'll listen to how your data is performing in your settings in Marketo Measure, and it can spit back feedback on how to optimize it. So we have our setup to look at the first touch. So in this case, visiting that homepage gets 20% of credit when an opportunity is created across our revenue streams. Then we, in this case, suppress the lead creation. For us, leads can be in our system for a long time before we actually engage them as the marketing department. And for us, we have a funnel path record. So marketing qualified lead, that's determined by when somebody has enough points to get passed from the demand marketing team to the sales development team. That's 15 points for us. And so we have 25% of our credit going to the marketing qualified lead. So if you want to use a custom model, just a quick step back here, and you have key stages in your CRM that you want to listen for, you can set that up in the stage mapping in your settings and then pull that into your model if you have a custom model. So that's why we went the path of a custom model here. But we're listening for 25% of the credit going to this key accelerator. So this is a high value touch point of a person took the survey. Then you'll see the next, oops, sorry about that. The next up for us, we have our op creation is this SDR meeting here. So in our system, we like to give credit to the meetings that came from our sales development team that were affected by demand. So I'll show you actually in a little bit what that could look like in your system. But for us, we wanted to give credit to those meetings as those are a part of the buyer journey. A lot of companies will set up attribution for seller engagements as well. In our instance, we like to say the seller is responsible for creating and closing every opportunity. So we layer our attribution on top of what they're already doing to show what impacted the demand marketing team and sales development team do on top of that. And if there's the absence of those touch points, then it's a seller-driven opportunity without the support of marketing. So we have these big stages. And again, finishing out with our intent data over here for this was the last touch point we had before close. We give 10% of credit to that piece, and we spread 20% of the credit across our middle touches, which in our settings include both SDR meetings and demand engagements. And what that does for us is tells us a full story of all the influencers along the way. So that's our custom model. Again, the model, the way you set it up is a great thing to do in collaboration with your marketing leaders, operations, sales leaders, to really get that buy-in for what counts. It's really answering what counts in that journey so you can report out on the impact of what you're showing. So you may have seen in that last slide, we have a long timeline for our journey, and some companies do too, but others have shorter journeys as well. So I'm going to touch on just a few recommendations as you're setting up your instance or as you're reviewing and looking at your instance. I'm going to highlight just a few recommendations from the touchpoint settings and the channel settings here. So on this first slide, we'll look at the look back window and really where you set that up of what counts. That's really where it's answering the question of what do you actually want to report on? And again, this is good to do in collaboration with your sales ops, your sales leaders, your marketing leaders. You can, in your touchpoint settings, use a filter from the op creation date to the actual touchpoint date itself to say, how many days do I actually want to listen for here? So to do that, the questions that I think are important to ask in this case are, how long is your average buyer cycle? For us, we look back 2 years across a lot of our streams of revenue. That's because we have a really lengthy amount of time that it can take from the first engagement we have with the buyer to when the op is created and to when it's closed. So when we did our analysis on that, within a few standard deviations, we wanted to capture those that were in a 2-year span. Some companies you might find it's a lot quicker. If it's only a year or even a half of year, you might look at a tighter look back window of what actually counts. So touchpoint settings can suppress out almost anything. So you could filter out anything from visits to an unsubscribe page to a certain window look back to certain record types in your systems. But what we really like to use it for and what I found really helpful is just setting that look back window to say, what can even be looked back to count as attribution for our company. So here's the idea for an exercise for you. If you analyze the amount of revenue driven from different durations of look back windows from your first engagement with a company to when they became a customer for you, cut it by different slices of information that might be a little more or less than your average, maybe a few standard deviations out. Look at maybe 1 year, 2 years, 6 months, and see how much you'd include or exclude if you were to adjust your look back window. Next up, just a quick nugget here, just as you're looking at the settings, there's other things you can filter out too. So us as an example, our stream of revenue, hardware sales, has a shorter life cycle than some of the others. We really target that one in. We like to filter it down more by the ad campaigns, the URLs, the content actually is to contain verbiage pertaining to that line of our revenue stream because it can be layered on top of the other ones. So we put some settings in there to make sure it's extra targeted, and I'm happy to go through that if anyone would ever want to do a follow-up on that. So let's pivot real quick to channels. When you're setting up your channels, you're saying what counts as what out there. So we have in the Marketo Measure settings, you have online channels and offline channels that you're setting up. We found the offline channels, or sorry, the online channels to be a bit more challenging. So I'm going to speak to a tip on that today. But when you think about offline, think about campaigns, things that you're putting into a campaign itself. Versus when you're thinking about online, think of web behavior. So people are coming to your website, that would be an online. So in your Marketo Measure settings, you're setting up, what do I even listen for? And what channel does that map to if someone does a certain action? So one thing that we found really helpful in this is to have a standard naming convention when we allow our marketing users to set up campaigns that online channels can listen for, and when they're building like the UTM parameters that pull into their offline campaigns as well. Sorry, reverse those. UTM parameters, online campaigns, Salesforce campaigns, or your CRM campaigns for your offline. So an example of governance here that you could consider is encourage them to use a standardized UTM builder. So for us, I'll show you just a quick view into ours. We use ours in Excel. There's online resources you can do as well, where people select from dropdowns. So if it's a URL they're building, they paste the URL in the tool. They specify what channel, what sub-channel, what year is this initiative in? What source do I want to push this back to if it's in a URL? Descriptors are for, you saw one of our events, that's a trade show we go to, is Gartner. You could put Gartner in here and that would pull into the campaign name. Which team or region is it pulling into? That way you can really specify in reporting what was the intention behind this. Revenue stream, content, there's a lot you can pull in here. And based on the selections that the user makes, it'll populate the name that they can go put into their Marketo Engage program name, into your CRM as the campaign name. It'll give you the URL you can use. And that really helps just standardize the information. So why do something like this? For us, we find that it empowers accurate and effective reporting. So we basically take these options that are in our builder, and that's what we use when we uploaded the big file into what we listen for in our online channel settings, because we knew that it would be integral and accurate when we wanted to report out on things like our regions of Europe versus North America and whatnot. It also simplifies your channel online rules as well. So, yeah, it just makes it easier for you. So if you'd ever want to deep dive into that, happy to do so. But just a good recommendation out there is make everything standardized so that when you go to reporting out, you know exactly what you're reporting on and can slice and dice your filters in that way. So with that being said, let's jump into some reporting. So in our system, we like to pull a lot of information from our Marketo instance into our Marketo Measure instance into our CRM. So we'll look at some standard reportings real quick, some standard reporting in the CRM there, and actually pulling data for those of you that are looking to expand how you use your attribution data, in pulling it into different objects like our leads and contacts or the people object, depending on the CRM you use. Funnel progression. For us, we have a custom object for that. We'll look at that in a second. Your meetings and your opportunities as well. And I should put the caveat out there. Marketo Measures standard reporting in the instance itself is fantastic. If you find that's checking the need for you, great. Lean on it. It shows ROI. It shows a lot of great detail. details. For us, at our company at Service Express, our stakeholders really like to see reports in the objects that they're familiar with so that they can see all the other pieces of data that they'd want to cut our information by. And that's for us why we pull it into our CRM a lot. So first, I'm going to start with another question, and I've put my answer here. But if you want to take a second, either use the QR code to scan or go to that website to essentially answer the question, what does your company use as a CRM right now? That'll help us speak to some of the use case here in a second. So I'll wait for you to answer this question, and then we can dive into what it looks like in our system. Dynamic CRM, great. And I see Salesforce is growing too. Okay, good. A lot of Salesforce. Great. So the terminology I'll be using today will be similar for what a lot of you will be seeing. And I'll try to speak nice and generically for those using dynamic CRM as well. Yeah, Salesforce is great for integrating with our Marketo Measure and Marketo Engage instances. Okay, so some helpful reporting. Again, attribution would not be worth it if you couldn't use it to answer questions. So reporting is so important when it comes to how are you implementing your attribution model into your business's operations. So just a few quick and good reminders here on the front end. Your Marketo Measure touch points, so the actual successes that happen, can connect to leads, so people and contacts and accounts. So they could be reported and sliced and diced on all with those objects, and in addition to your Marketo Measure people. Attribution touchpoints can do all of that and connect to the opportunities as well. So when you're thinking of wanting to report out on pipeline, revenue impact, accounts with various touch points, people with various touch points, there's a lot you can do. And I just shared a few of my favorite groupings and filters that I like to use in reporting of you can filter by the marketing channels or the go-to-market channels, your sub-channels, your campaign, your CRM campaign, if that's different. And specifically, if you want to only look at your CRM, so Salesforce in our case, the landing page, you can filter by the top revenue or show top revenue by the landing pages people have hit, the sources, the mediums, the ad content, and more. So let's take a look at what this could look like. So here's a screenshot of a few reports in our Salesforce instance. These are just some standard high-level reports that I wanted to highlight that could be helpful for you and your business. So the report types we're pulling in here on this slide are a Marketo Measure touchpoints with accounts, because we like to filter by accounts owned by certain seller groups. And then also opportunities with Marketo Measure attribution touchpoints. So these two are showing some of the pipeline created by our channels month over month. So, and then also it's looking at the revenue closed by channel month over month. You can do the same thing with op count that you can do with dollars if you're curious about that metric too. For us, we pull in our custom model to do that. So we pull in our filters for attribution, custom model revenue, and custom model record count. Whereas if you had used a first touch model or another touch model, you can also slice and dice by what other models would look like in your system too. So to answer the questions that I like to ask from data sets like this are which channels do we see the most pipeline and revenue from? It's a great thing you can do with the information in your CRM that pushes from your Marketo Measure instance. Then also you can look at how much revenue and pipeline has our marketing department driven or our go-to-market strategy driven over the last 12 months. So again, for us, we include sales development engagements as that in our model. And that's why I have to differentiate. It's not just marketing attribution. It could be your whole go-to-market that you incorporate into your model. Here's a few more high level before we zoom in a little bit, but these two screenshots here. So we have a demand marketing touchpoints report in our system, and we've got this broken out. It's just a simple touchpoint report. So it's showing the quantity of touchpoints we have coming in by the various channels that we have. This could again narrow down to your campaign or your sub channel or more. So that can really do a good job at answering the question of which channels do we see the most touch points from, just in a strict volume ways. Another piece you can use in your system, so when you actually pull it in, so the opportunities with Marketo Measure attribution touch points, what we really like to analyze is looking at which channels are influencing each key stage of our attribution model. So you saw ours, we have first touch, MQL, marketing qualified lead, op creation, and closed. So we love to analyze our channels at what percentage of our first touch, for instance, attribution came from each of our channels. What this can do for you is it can help you optimize where you target each of your channels along the journey. So, say content syndication is really high on the front end, but a little lower towards like the app closed, it might be worth featuring that channel at the beginning of your buyer's journey, where, say, maybe outbound is a little better towards the end, for instance. You could cater that more later on to influence the buyer journey towards a close in your life cycle. Here's some campaign specific reports here too. So we looked at the high level. Here's some standard out of the box reports that you can do to drill in a little bit to your campaign performance. So I grabbed an example from one of our data center and infrastructure surveys that we send out. And the report types we're using here are our Marketo Measure touchpoints report type, and then opportunities with attribution again. But this is filtered by a very specific campaign. So what we like to do is pull at the during a campaign running, like our survey, we make a whole dashboard for it to show the waterfall of how many people did we get to take our survey, how many how many people that took our survey came from various sources. So this report here is showing the website sources that drove people to engage here. And then as a retro after the fact, how many meetings came from it? I'll show you the meetings piece in a second because that's not as standard, but how many opportunities and what pipeline came from the specific campaign. So these are some good questions that your attribution model in your CRM can answer for you. That is really helpful for the boots on the ground teammates, so the marketing users that are driving the strategies, whereas the previous slides can show the higher level stories for optimization and for reporting out to your sales leaders too. So how much pipeline and revenue came? So those are some of the key questions there. I love this one because it's amazing to me how in the weeds your attribution can go. All right, quick checking the time here to make sure, and I will keep cruising here. So this last piece is really fun. So we have some great Salesforce CRM admins in our team, and what we've really leveraged them for is to build data from our attribution model into other objects so we can gain insight to other few pieces in the funnel too. And I'll show you what a little bit of that looks like. So for us, we track our funnel progression as its own object. What that basically means is if someone goes from never engaging with us before to becoming engaged, becoming a marketing qualified lead, we have a custom object we created called a funnel path record that connects to the people and to the accounts on that. What I love about that is in that object, we've been able to build the information in like duration of those funnel path objects, what campaign, what channel drove it. So we can have reports like this that show how many MQLs by channel are we driving on a given month. If you do your tracking of your funnel on the person, you can do this too. So want to speak to that as well. Another object we love to pull attribution into is our meetings as well, to really show how many meetings came from every specific campaign. So this is an example from that same dashboard we looked at before of a campaign specific. It's showing the meetings that came from that initiative because we pulled that in. I'll show you how that works in a second. And then also looking at it in a more aggregated by channel approach. So how does it work? Again, leveraging your Salesforce admin team, if that's under RevOps, Marketing Ops, wherever that sits. When a lead or contact creates an action or does an action that creates a touch point, you can use a flow, if you're in Salesforce, or really CRM automation to grab the last touch point that happened and pull that information onto fields on that person. So why would you really want to do that? And actually, I'm going to show you what it looks like in our system. This is a screenshot of one of our people. We like to pull last marketing channel into every person, the last marketing sub channel for us, that's a trade show in this case, the campaign, you'll see some of our verbiage from the UTM builder we have, and then the last Marketo legacy name, the last touch point date. This is really helpful if you want to pull some reporting by people's last engagement that they did and just see that on the person level that connects to other fields in your CRM. Further, I've found pulling these fields onto the lead itself can really help with automation in your Marketo Engage instance. So we like to use like the last engagement that someone did to help automate them entering certain or transitioning streams or entering nurtures. And then one key piece that we use this last visible touchpoint, so last Marketo touchpoint date, is we actually use this in our custom Marketo and Salesforce sync to say, if they've had a touchpoint in the last year, make sure to keep them in Marketo and keep the person synced. Even if they've done an unsubscribe, we still want to see the data on that person. So that's how we like to use that information. And then on that custom object, if you have a custom object or if you have this on your leads and contacts, when you're tracking funnel progression, we really like to understand which channels progressed someone down the funnel. So I've shared our key stage in our funnel here, which is our marketing qualified lead. For us, again, it's when someone bubbled up to 15 points and is ready for our sales development team to call on them. And the pieces from the touch point that we've pulled and extracted onto this funnel path object here, you'll see we've got engaged, marketing qualified lead. You'll see the from stage duration. I love this for reporting. But what you can really see from your attribution touch point, or sorry, your touch point in this case is what campaign did they engage with, what channel did they engage with, and what sub channel. You can pull way more than that, but we find that's really helpful to understand our progression. And last but not least here is we really like to pull information from our touch points into our meetings too, to see the full funnel of progression from engagement to meeting set to op creation to the middle touches along the way to close. But what we like to do is pull it in our reporting is our sellers and our sales development team really rely on meeting reporting, set and held. So we built into a flow that a piece that grabs from the last touch point that happened. When a meeting's created, this is a picture of our event in our Salesforce instance. That was created back in 2024. When this event was created, so when the sales development rep created this meeting, our flow went and grabbed the campaign and channel and sub channel associated with that. So we could see in the meeting itself and in the reporting itself what drove that meeting. We've applied a 3-month look back window on that so it doesn't go really far back, just to keep it tight. As for our sales development team, if they're following up to a demand marketing success, we know it's successful if it happened within 3 months, but some other companies, it might take longer or less time than that. So this really helps give some of those reports that we were looking at when we started this section, which is how many meetings are different channels and campaigns driving. And a fun note, if you want to drive attribution for what your sales development team or your sales team is doing too in your Marketo Measure instance, you can listen for all that data that's populated to actually pull it into your attribution model. So back to our Marketo Measure settings, if you go under the miscellaneous tracking and activities, you can create a campaign for that listens for something like SDR meeting from intent data. Here's a screenshot of one of our rules that we use that listens for the date when it's created, the sub channel that we pulled into our meeting, and gives that attribution back to intent data because we then pull this campaign name into our online channel settings and we upload that by saying, if you see this campaign show up, it's going to give and report back out to that I downloads, which is our intent data download subchannel of our intent data channel. So just a fun food for thought if you want to attribute other things outside of your demand marketing's strategies there. Oh, there's all my highlights. Sorry about that. So how does this all pull together? The impact of an attribution model should be to be able to answer questions for your stakeholders. So I'm going to highlight a few here. I'm sure you know of many already too, but the questions we like to provide answers for with our attribution model are which channel should drive each touchpoint position? So think first touch, lead creation, and op creation and closed. And each stage in your go-to-market strategy, you can pull reports to optimize that. Which channel should produce meetings? So what we just showed is pulling that into the meetings. So which ones are key at progressing that piece of the funnel? And then what percentage of our marketing qualified leads convert to meetings? We like measuring that up by channel so we can make optimizations and look back and set a benchmark to, all right, if one channel should have 2 MQLs per one meeting and it's doing a little less well in that, we can really lean in on that between our teams to make sure that we're optimizing that the best that we can. Also, a question that's important, especially for your stakeholders and your leaders, is how much revenue should we expect from each channel? You can work that back to say how much you should drive and marry that up to what your whole team delivers. And then a big question we get from our leaders is if we get X more dollars of investment, what channel should we increase spend on? So you're really looking at the ROI there. And then last but not least here, operationalizing the insight you have access to. So outside of just the reports, here's some things that really understanding your attribution model well can do for you. So you can optimize your channels by their performance ratios throughout the whole buyer funnel. Looking at touch points, looking how it pulls into your unengaged to engaged to marketing qualified lead or whatever funnel stages you have at your company. And then also looking lower in the funnel to once an opportunity is created, how does it progress from there? equipping individual contributors and leaders with marketing-wide and campaign-specific dashboards. So we looked at some of the dashboard components that we use at our company. And our marketing or our revenue operations team gets asked for reporting on attribution all the time to prove how did this campaign do from a revenue, from a pipeline, from a meeting, and from just driving engagement standpoint. And then also establishing goals. We use this information to bubble up to show how many opportunities, how many meetings, how many MQLs should come from demand marketing. We also use this information to set goals for our sales development team and what percentage of our ops and our meetings should be coming from our whole marketing department. So hopefully, if you have data like this too, you can do the same. It's really helpful for leaders and forecasting in the next year. And last but not least, establishing a strong feedback loop with sales on the leads and ops source from the marketing department. So a big thing here, I strongly encourage you is to have feedback loop meetings, maybe every 6 months to 1 year, where you take your stakeholders in a room and say, how are each of these processes going? We just had a great meeting with our sales development leaders, our demand leader, our demand marketing team, and RevOps to essentially assess our MQL to meeting set ratio, our meeting set to held, our held to op creation, looking at that by channel, and also looking at our touch point positions. And it was really helpful to get the feedback from our sales dev team of what's driving meetings, what's not, so we could make adjustments accordingly. So I hope if you learned anything today is your attribution model can help you provide great answers to the questions you ask, and you can do a lot with it if you go that route. So with that being said, would love to see if anyone has questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see you all.
I'm going to go ahead and take us off record as well. So if people want to throw their questions in chat or come off mute, either is great, but you won't be in perpetuity, as we said. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to include that in the recording, and very excited to see it. Particularly, I really like, I'll say, the custom object that you have in Salesforce that's allowing you to tie some of that together. I think that's really, really smart. I've seen that done in different ways, and yours is one of the more elegant ones. So with that, I'll pause us, and if you've got a question, bring it on.